It looks like a legal goal.
And it's obviously not from Team Canada or from anything else, but it's from them having heard my voice on the podcast. Or sometimes you'll have someone who comes into the Team Canada Discord and then sends a screenshot of my face and says, "Hey, is this you?" Like, yeah, you didn't put two. Okay, we're fine.
This is way cool because I had that like moment where I had like one really like successful year in different like fields, and then people would come up to me and I was like, and you know me from just to kind of gauge, and I figured it must have been like the same for you, where sometimes you'd be Jeremy the judge, sometimes you'd be Jeremy the stats guy, and other times you'd be just like, oh yeah, captain, head coach Jeremy, yeah.
Yeah, I had that interaction a couple times actually at the World Champs this past weekend, where one of my opponents was like, "You look really familiar." We both did that to each other, and so I started going through. Do you listen to stat check? No. Okay, you should. And then I was like, "Oh, were you at any of the U.S. Opens?" Because I was helping out with those. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I was at U.S. Open Tampa. I got second best overall. That's why I'm here." I was like, "Oh, okay, you would have seen me in the yellow shirt then." Probably watched
At
some
that
of your
moment I
games and
was
helped
judging,
you
but
out.
now I am playing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he kind of looked at the table and went, "Oh, this is really over then."
But that is way cool. Do you get more starstruck with people or reverse starstruck? Like, is it more discomfort for you to recognize somebody like, oh, that's I don't know, Paul Murphy, or that's Nick Nanavati, or getting recognized and then you feel like, oh, this people knows who I am. I have to not be a weirdo.
It's been a weird come up because I've talked to a lot of those people in behind the scenes over the last few years, just through different avenues. So I never really had the that's John Lennon or ooh that's Nick Nadavati experience um, since I started attending a lot more events post COVID. Pre COVID, I definitely experienced that. Post COVID, where I've been more active and more involved, I'll go to the event and it'll just be, "Hey Nick, how's it going?" Like that. That's the interaction because it's just we're just there to do our jobs.
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause
And then
that's a funny one.
at events that I'm playing at, it's just kind of like, yeah, we're just players here. If someone recognizes me from StatCheck, I'm just like, yeah, cool. I'm glad you enjoy the show. Let's play the game in front of us. I'm just another hobbyist here. Like I don't want to be.
Yeah, you don't want to be treated as a celebrity Warhammer player or
No, it's
something.
it's the
Yeah.
last thing that I want. I just want to be another guy who enjoys the hobby.
Oh, so, well, thank you for being on the podcast, despite this, because my goal is like super stardom, as always. So, I hope I don't bring you up to that level of fame here with my little shindig, uh, which will get like 6 viewers, by the way. So, and then just to maybe touch on the stat check thing. So, stat check is, I think, currently the like leading stats for competitive 40K, right? Like you pull all of the data, you run the elo system for pretty much the entire scene, and I think a lot of sites that pull their data from yours, correct?
Yeah, that's true. So there's three of us that are in the game right now. There's StatCheck, there's the Meta Monday guy, Joseph Shutlift, and then there is Goonhammer. And each one of them has their own way of collecting data. Each one has their own way of processing the data. I find that myself, because I've only been doing this about 2 years, but we tend to deliver the most comprehensive look at stats. So we don't just look at armies, we also look at detachments. So like every time a new codex comes out, you can now look and be like, okay, Iron Storm is the way to go for Space Marines. Don't play Stormlands. And then we also look at like what allies people are running. So we look at, all right, what kind, like, do you want to include Agents of the Imperium? Do you want to throw an Imperial Knight in your list? Or if you're playing Chaos, Space Marines, you always have those demon allies. We look at that and we look at how that influences your performance in the game.
That is way like that's super in depth, and that's one thing I've really hated about the stats is kind of the catch-all things. For example, right now Chaos Space, as we're talking, Chaos Space Marine is like a big deal, but Chaos Space Marines with like the bad units is one thing, and then Chaos Space Marines with like the cultists is another thing, and then Chaos Space Marines with the chosen is kind of another thing. And I always felt like, well, Chaos Space Marine has a good win rate. Well, if it's not like through the roof, it's because people are playing the bad ones. Like the bad stuff is really bad, but the good stuff is really good. And I find this like hard to gauge. So do you see that, or do you just go like, you want to play a sucky army, you play a sucky army, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect stuff that much?
There's an element of that. It's it's some people are faction diehards. It's really hard to convince them to move away from a faction that they love and know. We saw a little bit of that at the World Champs, where there's some people who like. We had 2 Drukhari players, we had 2 Deathwatch players, we had 2 Demons players. Those are armies that have really been struggling lately.
I'm surprised you're not
but
going with the one Imperial Knights and the one AdMech guy for real.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing though.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure.
They knew exactly what they were doing, and I can't throw Eric under the bus that hard.
No, I think it's a very smart move. Like you're going there, and then you pick the one of the weaker factions that you actually know, and then you just have one person to beat. Right? This is the Drukhari people are just unlucky because they got 2 of them instead of just the one.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Yeah, no, it's the faction stats are always interesting. Games Workshop actually just released a new MetaWatch article on Warhammer Community, which differs greatly from the stats that a lot of us have been talking about. It shows that the only 2 outside of their Goldilocks zone of 45 to 55% is Drukhari and Eldari, which we know from looking at data for the last 2 months isn't the case. Chaos Demons, Imperial Knights, Custodians are all struggling as well. And then on the other end of that, Chaos Space Marines and Eldari are significantly higher than what Games Workshop had shown us, to the point where like they both need some fairly substantial adjustments to bring them back in line.
Yeah, especially since that article itself mentioned like just tweaking the internal balance, and I feel like a lot of these books, the internal balance is not the biggest issue with them. And how do you kind of maybe balance this out where somebody that's not into stats, for example, and somebody that's like balls deep into the stats get kind of a kick out of playing their book or enjoyment through this?
I think the best way to look at that, and this is something that I often will tell other people, is everyone should have realistic expectations going into an event. And so if you consider yourself to be an average player, which is for the longest time that's where I considered myself. I think after the champs I can bump myself up to an above average player. Is that just slightly above? Is that you need to make sure you go to an event and be like, okay, if my army is a balanced faction, it's sitting in that Goldilocks zone, and I've brought a list that I feel is fairly adjusted to the meta, then I can expect to have about an equal number of wins and losses. So if I go 2-3 or 3-2, I should be happy with that result. Any more than that, I'm either expecting myself or my faction to overperform, or I'm expecting to get lucky on pairings or dice at some point. But when you go into an event where you have a army that has been overperforming consistently, and you're still an average player, you should still be expecting that like 3-2 result. You can't expect to hit that 4-1 or 5-0 at an event. So that's what I like to look at people when they ask what to do with the sets. Is like you can look at it, you can look at what you're expected to see in the field, because one of the things that we present on our website is overrepresentation and faction representation. So you can look and be like, okay, 20% of the field is Space Marines, so I should probably take something that's able to kill Space Marines. Or like 10% of the field is Eldari, I should probably bring something that can deal with the Incarn, or just accept it's a loss.
Yep, this is where the thermostat check comes from, folks.
Yeah, and then if you're playing a bottom end faction, you need to be okay with the fact that you might go 1-4 or 2-3 at best if you're an average player. And if you're okay with that and you come to those terms, you're gonna have a much more enjoyable event.
I wholeheartedly agree. And one thing I'm kind of happy that you went there, because you went instantly to tournaments. But I'm more thinking about like more maybe Garage Hammer, people that don't really follow this that much. But when all they hear is like, let's say I'm a hardcore. What's the weak one right now is with Drukhari? You said the lowest.
Yeah, sure.
So let's say I'm a hardcore, Drukhari, the Dark Max. How do I like find like joy into this, or just like deal with the fact that my army is never lucky, which very appropriate for Drukhari now that I think about it. But
yeah, I think they can just channel that power from pain somehow. I think for that is one of these things where like being aware of your faction's relative strength against like your buddy who you're playing in your garage, you can then turn that into more of okay, my goal isn't to win this game, my goal is I want to kill more things in melee than you do, or I want, that one centerpiece unit that you have, your warlord. I want to make sure that I take your
Yeah,
warlord captive.
kill the warlord is always
You turn it into like, especially, and this is something you can do a lot more with Garage Hammer than you can in a tournament. You can turn it into more of a narrative aspect, where you embrace that side of the game, where you're like, no, I'm going to play this like a raiding force that hits and runs, hits and runs, hits and runs. We take losses, but we're never like completely out of it. But we're going to lose the game, but we won the battle.
Yeah, because you have this side objective that does not really because I've seen this happen with like a group of guys. They started playing last year, and three of them, like they didn't know. I didn't tell them, like this is good, and they were just like looking at models, and three of them picked like top tier factions. One of them picked like a bottom tier faction, and they started playing. They were like, "Hey, Max, I'm never winning against these guys." I'm like, "Well, yeah, you have to. You're in a bad place." And I had a really hard time to come up with like what to do, because like the other guys were like looking at their thing. I was like, "Oh, this is like super good," right? And
and that can be disheartening for a new player early on. It's something that I struggled with a lot when I came back into the hobby in 2018 and started playing competitively in 2019. I was playing Dark Angels in 8th edition, and that army was not good.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what was Dark Angel in 8th edition. The fact that I can't remember is probably a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Like their issue was, because this was back when the Marine books were all split up still for the non-codex compliant. So like for the first little bit, you got FAQs that would help the Marines, but they wouldn't do it to the Dark Angels and Space Wolves and Blood Angels. Dark Angels also had like the three kind of parts of the chapter that didn't fit well together, because you had the Deathwing, the Ravenwing, and then the regular
and then
guys.
you couldn't get like any of the characters into the fun detachment. Oh yes, I remember now. Oh, yes.
Yeah, and then obviously we had the Space Marine 2.0 book from 8th that ended the meta that edition, and so Dark Angels were just left completely behind by that. People would say, "Oh, you're playing Marines." It's like, no, I'm playing Dark Angels. They're garbage.
Yeah, they were Marines adjacent.
Yeah, like I still remember going into Capital City Bloodbath in 2019, and the Repulsor Executioner had just come out, and it was this cool, amazing vehicle that everyone, tons of guns, and then they were just like, it was a pain to play into. But the wording on the release, because this was back when they had all sorts of messed up rules wording, didn't have the right wording so that non-codex compliant chapters could take it.
Oh.
Only Space Marines could take it.
Yeah, of course.
And so then, it was just one of those data sheets they released on Warhammer Community. And then, like a week or so before, like 2 weeks before the event, they released an update, which increased the points on it, but also made it so everyone could take it. And so I was like, oh, cool. I don't care. I want to, I have 2 of these. They're new, but I want to play them. I want to finish painting them. I'm going to bring them to Bloodbath. And then Bloodbath decided they weren't going to use that update because the regular Marine players were upset that the cost went up. So I was sitting there going, so I've got 2 models that I cannot play. And I was like, all right, fine. So that was the story of Dark Angels in early 8th. I was like, I've been there. I've been to the, like, this sucks. I'm on the struggle bus. And so I would look at the stats and be like, okay, my goal for the event is, we're sitting at a 40% rate. My goal is 2-4 or 3-3. Like, if I can finish with a 50%, that means I played better than your average Dark Angels player.
Which is great, because I remember you did this for the WTC event where you just compared like the Canadian players' stats versus the average stats for whoever was playing that faction, and I thought that was like really telling, because a lot of these factions had like very similar roles anyway. And so that's a very interesting thing. I think it goes past everybody's like common goal to just do better than the average bear with your faction.
Yeah.
Not.
I mean, that should be how you should always be kind of settling things. Is that is making, like I say, back to the beginning, having realistic goals, but setting them relative to something, and that's how you know that they're realistic goals.
Yeah, 4-2 with like Eldar is very manageable. 4-2 with Drukhari is something way out of the
4-2 with Drukhari
field.
is a Ridvan performance.
Yeah, exactly. The real Darkin, the real Arshan over here. And just to maybe take it the exact opposite for a guy like you now, that's like super, again, to use my nomenclature, balls deep in stats. How do you pick your own hobby project? It's always like stats driven. Oh, I can't do Drukhari right now. They're just so terrible.
So for me, and this is something that's evolved a lot over the years, I have largely just my core factions that I work with. So I start with Dark Angels. They're always going to be my first one. New releases or things that tweak within there, I'll usually look to just expand because we all know Marines is an army is a subscription service more than
Yes.
just an army because it never ends. You will never have a complete Marine army.
Oh yeah, always new kits and it's such a
Always new
complete
kits, always
range.
refreshes. Sometimes the old kits that came out 20 years ago become viable again. Sometimes they legends half your army. Yeah,
Contemptor's gone,
yeah.
but not forgotten.
Let's just put it this way: I'm glad that Proviathan can never happen again.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, to kind of get back to that, so for me, so I have my Dark Angels, I have my Imperial Knights, I have my Custodes, I have my Admech, I have my Voten, and I started a Sisters army earlier this year. I have a Guard army, but I'm slowly getting rid of it because it just brings me no joy. So I'm Mary Kondoing that shit.
Oh, nice. There we go.
So
You're
for
the
me,
second
it
person
really
ever that I hear using Mary Kondo as a verb into a Warhammer context, and I'm all about it. I've said this to
it's
other
so true,
people,
though.
and they were.
It brings me no joy. So I was like, all right,
There
Zach,
we
you
go.
want more Sentinels? I'm gonna regret this, but have some more Sentinels.
Yeah, that's the problem with selling
Um,
to your buddies. That's a whole
yeah,
episode right there. It's like how do you handle the tradesies here of your models? That's a
oh, I'm gonna regret this, but here you go. But yeah, so for me, it really comes down to like whatever army I'm most interested in, and then I look to see if that army is competitively viable. I usually have an idea before I even get to that stage because I'm so,
And
as you
is your
say, knee
idea
deep
usually
neck deep in stats.
hobby related or tabletop, or like I want this like combo or something, or is it more just like these guys look cool?
There's a mix of that. So, like for example, right now I have on my paint table a bunch of Chthonian Berserks from Leagues of Votan. I've got the collectible version of the Einhir Champion where she's
Yes.
holding the shield up because that model is
Yeah, the
gorgeous.
ancestors' revenge is so yeah, it's so
Yeah,
amazing.
and then I've also got like the Triumph of St. Catherine on my desk that I'm working on. So it's just kind of like Triumph of St. Catherine, really cool model. The sisters aren't going to be in like my army is all gray right now. So my sisters are very much a like I'm working on it as this is what I think is cool right now, and I'll paint that in a year's time I'll have an army I can play with. And then on the competitive front, it's my Leagues of Votan where I'm looking to add Berserks to the army. I'm looking to maybe add another champion to the army and kind of toying around with that. So it's always I try to strike a balance between there's that I'm running to get something ready for a tournament, but also always on the side keeping something else on the paint table. So if I don't have a tournament coming up or I don't have something that I need to get ready for, keep that hobby progress going.
That's my biggest problem, and that's also what I tell a lot of people is like, well, just sign up for a tournament and we'll motivate you. And I'm very tournament driven. Like all my armies are usually built for a tournament and then maybe expanded. But when there's no tournament inside, like I've been like on a hiatus for like a year of like not attending any event, and my army building is kind of not been there, because without that one motivation, it feels like I'm not there yet. So
Yeah.
and you but you go to like a whole lot of events. Do you mainly stay with the same army? Because I mean the meta doesn't change, right? So you must stay with the same. This is strong.
So even if the meta did stay the same, and this has happened to me a couple times, I get bored. I have ADHD, so I get bored both with stuff that I'm working on and also stuff armies that I'm playing. So sometimes like, yeah, this is kind of not interesting anymore. Let's see what Imperial Knights can do right now, or like that'll happen, and I'll hit some success with them, and I'll just stick with them for a few months, and then I'll pivot off again. Like for example, a good example of that was last year. I came out of the WTC. I was done with my Dark Angels. I had a not a great run at War Masters, and I'd seen a whole lot of interesting things at the WTC proper.
Sounds
And
like
I
a
was like, you know,
very love-hate relationship you have with Dark Angel. Just from a
oh,
quick therapy session here that we're having.
100% love-hate relationship with that army. They are my first competitive army. They are the army that I've achieved some of my best competitive success with. But man, have they betrayed me at every possible check. It's almost like it's
Very
on theme
fitting,
for
very
them.
hobby accurate, right?
Yeah. They're very lore accurate in that sense. But like, yeah, so I said, and they actually sat in a case for 3 months because I'd never unpacked them from when I came back from Belgium. And I was like, let's try Imperial Knights again. I haven't played them in a while. I haven't played pure Imperial Knights ever. Let's see how this feels. And so I took that to Capital City Bloodbath. I finished second. I was like, yeah, this feels great. And so I just I stayed on Knights for the next few months. Meanwhile, Votan came out. I was like, squats? Yeah, let's do this again. built that army up, took that army to LVO, played a couple more events with it, and then rotated back to my Dark Angels again. So it's just kind of this like constant rotation between the armies that I have, and every now and then I'd be like, for example, earlier this year I had some store credit, and I was like, what do I want to do? I don't need anything for any of my current armies. Let's build a Sisters army, which impulse being what it is now.
I'm very familiar with this. I'm staring
God
at
knows how
the
many
World
points
Eaters
of
hobby
Sisters.
box right now. I'm very.
And having played them, like I played against them a couple times, once at the champs and a couple times before that, and I actually really like the playstyle of the Sisters as compared to like my Vote 10 and a couple other armies that I played recently. So I think it'll work out. But it was very much an impulse, and so that just adds one to the rotation that I'll work through as the year goes on. So come WTC and War Masters, who knows what I'm on? Well, I'll be on whatever the team tells me I need to play if I'm playing for the team.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have the final say maybe in this. The stat will dictate what you like at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how? Oh, that's another fun little thing. How do you translate the let's see, IN competitive side with the hobby side? Do you find like you recently were at the Golden Ticket event, the World Warhammer World Championship? Warhammer Championship
The World Championships
of
of
the World?
Warhammer. I don't know. I think they call it WCCW, which putting that in Atlanta is definitely a choice, given from.
Let's geography aside.
No, I was more thinking. Anytime you Google WCW, you don't get the World Championships of Warhammer.
Yeah, that's yes. It's like what's the other one that's like whatever. That's
World Championship Wrestling.
yeah, that's not. But so how do you rate? Would you rate like the hobby versus what you'd find at a local game store versus what you see in these like? Because the World Championship was really probably one of the with the WTC the highest like level of gaming, right?
Yeah, so the World Championships, I would actually say, was even a higher tier of competition than the WTC. And the reason that I say that is we actually had, I think, more nations competing in that than we did at the WTC. Because the WTC, one of the challenges with that is you need to field an 8-man team plus maybe coaches and then the support, and sending all of that from like Korea just is expensive. So if you don't have the pockets, or if you don't have sponsors that can help with that, it's just not going to happen. Whereas if one guy wins a ticket to the World Champs from Korea, he can attend.
Yeah. Oh, 100. And also winning the ticket also means like it's all the good players basically. All these players are usually doing really great at tournaments, whereas in the team event you bring 8 people, it's the 8 people that can do it, and then the strength of that team is going to be whatever it is, right?
In some cases, it's going to be a fairly representative. Like for Poland, obviously, it is their best players they're attending. But then for as we use the example of Canada for many years, it was if you had $2,000 and a passport, you'd go to the ETC. But for the World Champs, it was very much like the average person there had won a major or larger event. Which, when you put that into context, it meant that every single round you were playing someone who had won a major or larger event.
So it's almost always like playing the finals of any other event that you go to.
I felt like I played 8 rounds of like GT finals in a row, back to back. It was the best Warhammer I've played in years, but some of the hardest Warhammer I've played in years.
Oh, for sure. That's why usually you only play one like that. Your brain's on the fire.
Yeah, brain just falling out the back of your skull at the end of that weekend.
But how's the painting aspect? Because I think a lot of more casual people or non-tournament goers always go, yeah, these like top table people, they don't paint or whatever, destroyer of the hobby. And
so here's the fun thing. So these events, the U.S. Open Series, a lot of the stuff that World Champs was pulled from that. So they have both best general and best overall. They also have best painting awards. Some of those best painted and best overall armies were not quite, but very close to like what I would consider Golden Demon standard. The individual who won Best Painted at the event, he also won Best Painted at Tampa, the U.S. Open there. Michael Fox, he was running a guard army with a Baneblade chassis.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen I think
There
I've
should
seen
be a
the
picture
one.
of him up on Warhammer Community because his army is just
Well, I'll put it in the.
gorgeous. Yeah, it's a. I can't describe it exactly, but it's one of these things where when I saw that, and I was just like, yeah, that better win Best Painted
Yeah.
at Tampa. And then he brought it, and he did even more to it when he brought it to the World Champs. And he was like, he got crushed because he brought a Baneblade. But he,
I like
perfect
how
paint
this is
score.
like just so
Like
matter of factly.
absolutely perfect paint score. And I just looked at that and went, yeah, that deserves it. And then even then, like the second, third, fourth, Best Painted and some of the best overalls, you looked at those armies like, yeah, those are gorgeous. And actually, it was funny. I was talking to someone who had attended the Grand Narrative event. You would think that like the narrative is where you'll see the really gorgeous armies.
100%.
He actually said that the World Champs looked better than the narrative.
Ooh. That's. Do you want to speculate as to why that is?
The only thing I can think of is that the people that are winning these tickets, like the golden tickets to attend, I can't speak for myself because I just paint my shit until it's tabletop quality. You've seen my armies, you know what they look like. They're fine. They're fine.
Yeah,
they're not winning. They're not winning any paint awards.
painted and they look like an army. My main criteria with armies is it looks like a army as a whole, not a collection of random pieces.
No, it's not Borrowhammer. Yeah, no, I got that. But yeah, like I think the biggest thing is that because this was the world stage and this was, yes, there were top tier competitive players, but there were a lot of people that were like, no, I'm going to take this as seriously as I can. And, some people borrowed armies, some people borrowed models, but a lot of the top tier level were like, no, I'm going to bring the best painted stuff I have. Like a good example of that is best overall was Boris Mishev from England. Absolutely gorgeous Chaos Space Marines army. And he did it in 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's...
Which was that moment of like, I can barely get like a battle ready army done in 6 weeks, let alone this. But yeah, like you look at some of those armies and some of them were gorgeous. There were definitely some that were less than pretty. Some where you, with the stream camera would zoom in on them. You go, please zoom back. Just give us a 3-foot view. I don't need to see that. I don't need to see where the gaps on that model are.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's the problem with the two good cameras, right? Like it's too good, but you should not see this up close. What was there was an event like that with the Brad Chester defying all laws of
that was
paint.
Cali
that was
Cup.
painful
He had models that looked finger painted. Yes.
Oh, for sure. That was a terrible. But the same thing of like, a couple of years ago, nobody would have noticed that it was this bad. But now cameras are really good.
Cameras are really good, but also the caliber of competition has just been elevated by such an amazing amount. Like it's one of those things like you no longer have a 3-color minimum. You now have battle ready, so you don't see the toothpaste armies anymore.
Well, you can still. Toothpaste comes in 3 colors. This is perfect.
But remember, battle ready means most of the details picked out.
That's unfortunate. That's okay. Lots of Space Marines don't have a lot of details. I'll make it. Aqua Fresh.
Go with the ghost. Just go with the ghost army. That's always the good fallback.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's all white with like sparkly eyes. You got this. You got the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Ghost Votan, Ghost Knights, Ghost Marine. You can do all, and then you can mix and match. It's perfect. But speaking of, because you saw Dominique's, because Dominique's always been in, locally, he's always been in my area, not really in the recent year, but that used to always be his thing of like, not only can he play like good the Warhammer, but he would also like get like super amazingly well painted stuff. So it would like beat you on the tabletop, and then his army would look better than yours, and you'd be like, wait, how can I lose?
I just feel
so
inferior
many
here. Yeah, no, his armies have always been gorgeous, and he did win 3rd best overall at the World Champs.
That's pretty fucking good.
And especially when you consider like best overall was Boris, who went, I think 6-2 or 7-2. And Dom went 5-3, so that means that his paint score just pushed him up by that much more to finish in that 3rd place record. I can't remember who finished 2nd. All I care about is our boy Dom made it in there. He
100%.
He showed that Canadians can hobby.
Exactly. Yeah, somebody has to. Who's going to do it otherwise? This guy? No.
Well, and can play because he also finished 5-3.
Yeah, exactly.
Finishing with a positive record in that field. I told anyone if you win at least 3 games at this event, you should be happy with your performance. Like unless you're like a really top player who like takes all of your identity from winning 3 games at that event should be like your floor of no, I belong here. I can come back next year and compete again.
Oh, for sure, for sure. How do you said something really interesting? Like you're a player that takes all of his identity from winning. That's a very I think that's a lot of people maybe do that but don't realize it, or they associate that with like how it needs to be to go to tournament. Do you want to maybe just expand on that? Maybe as a good closing words, I feel like motivational. Go all motivational on me. Bring back all of that Team Canada coaching experience and like give me a speech that will blast social
media. I will
media.
say this: I've been in that spot before. I've been the kind of person that that relegated my own self-worth to my performance in my career, performance in general life, my relationships, and in Warhammer. And it can be a very difficult thing to learn when you don't perform how you feel that you should be, and then have that impact on your own self-worth. And so you really need to, and this is something that's come out of the World Champs, especially right now, because there were a lot of people that got their vibes checked something hard, and are having to now, console themselves with, I am enough. You are enough. You need to be comfortable with that, because the more comfortable you are with that, the less that your gameplay, your mistakes, your losses, your wins will have an impact on how you feel. I'll be the first to admit, at the end of day 2, when I lost 2 games in a row to 2 different Germans, I was feeling pretty rough, because I felt both of those were winnable games. And I was like, eh. But turned around, it's like, nope, you know what? I'm 3-2 in the Worlds. Like, I'm going into the Worlds bracket with a positive record. I win one more game, and I'm at 4-4 minimum. This is great. So turn that around into I'm enough. I can get through this. I'm going to just do the best that I can, and I'm going to do the best for me. And that's something that a lot of players, especially at the top, I've seen struggle with. Players that are used to, I always win every GT or I podium every GT, then showing up to the Worlds and going 5-3 or 4-4 or 3-5, and you go, am I good enough? Am I enough? I'm shit. I'm shit at this game. I must be shit myself.
But this is so amazing because you talk about it to the highest level, and you see this at like the lower, much lower level of like guys that win with their friends, and then they come out and they play versus one of their like not friends or just outside their play group, and it's like a whole new world. And they get their shit pushed in, and they go, oh no, oh this is terrible. Warhammer is terrible. I don't want to be here. Or they win everything in their town or whatever, and then they go just outside their town, and suddenly they're not the big dogs. I feel like this translates to all levels. You describe it at the highest level at the highest event, but it also applies to the.
Oh, it happens so often. It happens at events like LVO, events like Adepticon, where you bring these large groups of people together for sometimes the first time where they're playing outside their meta, and they think they're hot shit. And then they, at Adepticon, they go 2-2 on the first day and don't even make day 2, and they're like, oh, okay.
This is not fun.
This isn't what I'm used to.
Yeah. Well, also making day 2 at Adepticon is really rough because it's like top 16 out of like 250 or something. Like you have to go 4-0 with like a lot of points
and have good paint.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, exactly. Last year somebody didn't play because the paint was too bad. I remember now. It was the first year they did that. I think that's a very like Games Workshop-ish thing, right? To like your paint is too bad for like to be featured here. Like
maybe, yeah. I mean, keep in mind, Adepticon is an independent event. It's not run by Games Workshop. They help out. I think the US
it's not run by Games Workshop, but they have like a lot. Like they kick the paint competition, like push the paint competition out to replace it with the Golden Demon. And it's their stream now.
It is a showcase of the hobby, so yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I agree. It's the Adepticon is its own thing, but like Games Workshop is like not helping. That's not the right word, but they're like taking they're involved in it a lot, right? Even though it's not theirs.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because the same thing for the team event, like the 4-man, which is like the crown jewel of the Adepticon, for the last like 3, well, ever since the post-COVID era, you cannot use non-Games Workshop models in your army if you want to be like featured on stream or if you want to do the showcase. Like that's a pretty big deal. Whereas it was like before then, it was like the far west of like conversions and third party and like crazy things. Whereas now it has to be crazy things from Games Workshop only, because if you have like third party models, it's a big no. It's just very interesting.
No, definitely the being able to be comfortable with yourself regardless of your play at an event. And I think this is especially true for people that identify as like pro players. We don't actually have any pro players in 40K. No one makes money doing this.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, it's the events are funny money, and then you have to
and coaching.
make your money out. Yeah, exactly. You make your money outside of the main
like anyone who takes their identity in that really needs to take a hard look at it, because they will have that event where they run into a wall, don't do well, and go, "Am I any good?"
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting that it happens a whole lot with Warhammer, where it's again nobody's like a real pro, and then you lose like one event, or you do bad at one event, and it's like this guy's not good, or he's like washed, and you feel like shit. Whereas like you look at like football players, and then like what they do. Like I'm a Jets fan, I can tell you that like they blow games, like this, and yeah, they're still out there. They're still in there's like pro players. You have to be okay with losing at some, because it happens like at all levels. It's just part of like the nature of the beast.
It's also one of the things where like you look at it, and it's really interesting comparing Warhammer to a lot of other like.
Well, just esports are probably closer, right?
Yeah, like you look at esports and you're like, okay, so this player has like a 55% win rate, which means they're really really good at the game. But then you look here, and in Warhammer, that means that someone has like a 90% win rate, and that just feels.
And it doesn't translate at all. It's fascinating. Do you think it's a culture thing, that one? Like we're not there yet as a community. The Warhammer scene is not there yet.
I think that's a big part of it. I think that the more the scene grows, the more the competition grows, the more that the depth of competition grows, the more that we'll see people coming to terms with this, and coming to terms just with the general vibe of it's okay to lose games.
I like that idea. So, Jeremy, how can the people find you? Our 6 listeners here that are enamored by this Terrence and Phillip avatar that you got going on, and those sweet Excel sheets that you've been talking about. Where do they find you?
So the main place that you can find me is on StatCheck. We're live every Tuesday, most every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/StatCheck or at stat-check.com. Which is our main website, which is where you can find the metadata dashboard. That's the main thing that we do, which is basically a really nice visualization of the current state of the meta in Warhammer 40,000. We look at any GT plus size event, so 25 or more players, 5 or more rounds, and it gets included in there regardless of what system you use for pairing it. So we look at Tourney Keeper, Best Coast pairings, Down Under pairings, BCP, and mini headquarters are the 5 main ones that we look at nowadays.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being part of Hobby Night in Canada, and I hope I get to talk to you again. Hopefully you're a popular fella, and then I get to coerce you into coming back.
I'm sure you can convince me to come back, Max. It's been a pleasure.